let's start with ranking the draft classes, because I think a lot of people, we tend to view drafts in a vacuum, start talking about the players, how good they are, what the order should look like. But we don't, I think, spend nearly enough time thinking about what this draft class looks like as an overall talent level and comparing it to previous classes. This guy might be the best corner in this draft, but where does he stack up next to a Sauce Gardner and those kinds of things? So I think we should have a look at the last 5 draft classes and sort of put them in some kind of order, figure out where they stack up next to each other, and then you can give us a little bit of an insight as to where this one stacks up.
Yeah, so basically when I look at a draft class, I think there's kind of 2 things that I look at to kind of tell the quality, or what is basically what we're discussing right now. One is how many blue chip guys there are. Like how many dudes are at the top that you are going to bat for that are just going to be good players. So how many blue chip guys are, and then how many guys are there that are kind of like you see as stars in the next level? Just basically the depth. How is this day 2 of the draft? How much talent is there? How many guys do you have those second round grades on that could be going in the 3rd round? So that's kind of the 2 ways that I like to judge draft classes, or the 2 basically ways that determine how strong a draft class is, in my opinion.
And it's been a very changing landscape like the last few years, because we've had COVID kind of mess everything up with guys coming back, extra, how many people are going to declare for each given draft class. There's also the NIL stuff that's changing everything, I think, because all of a sudden there's a financial incentive to stay in college, or at least to not risk, where you could be just to jump to the NFL to get the money as soon as humanly possible. Like you can make bank while you're in college. So I think it's an interesting time to start focusing on these various different draft classes, because it isn't the same every year.
Yeah, the rise of like the 6th years is very interesting from a draft perspective. We're going to have multiple quarterbacks this year that are 25 years old as rookies,
right,
that are going to get drafted. And then multiple offensive linemen that are going to be 24 years old. Like the rise of these adults playing against 19 and 18-year-olds is a unique development. And I think you're only going to see more of it with everyone, who has been in college, who was in college in 2020, being given that extra year of eligibility. I do think that that's only for, I guess, what is that till then, 2025, 2026? Like those drafts are all going to still be affected by that, or could still be affected by that, to where, and with the NIL, with people getting paid in college, you're going to see guys staying longer more than ever, I believe.
All right, so let's quickly run through these draft classes, and then I've got an order written down. We'll see if you agree with my order, and also where you're going to stack up the 2023 class next to these. So I believe we're going to go in chronological order, starting with the 2018 class. That was the Baker Mayfield class. Baker Mayfield, number 1. Obviously, there was the huge debate about all the quarterbacks that year. We ended up getting Baker at the top, Saquon Barkley, number 2. The Jets went with Sam Darnold. Didn't work out so well. Buffalo, obviously, at 7, getting Josh Allen. And then further down in that first round, we get Lamar Jackson. The weird quarterback group ended up not being the order that everyone expected it to be. 2019 was the Kyler Murray draft class, right? We had Kyler Murray as the number 1 quarterback, number 1 player in that draft, number 1 overall. Nick Bosa, Quinnen Williams. Weird class. Some guys at the top that weren't necessarily amazing. Daniel Jones starting to look better now as time goes on, and so on. 2020, which draft class was that? 2020 was Joe Burrow's draft class. Chase Young, Jeffrey Okudah, Andrew Thomas, who's turning into a superstar right now. Tua turning it around after his rough couple of years. Justin Herbert. 2021 draft class. That's the Trevor Lawrence draft class. Zach Wilson, obviously not turning out too well. Trey Lance still very much up in the air. Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase. And then last year's draft class, which was the no quarterback draft class at the top. Trayvon Walker, number 1 overall. Aiden Hutchinson. Then the 2 corners, Derek Stingley and Sauce Gardner, and so on. So my rankings for this group. I think that the 2021 draft class is the best of that group.
100%. Not even close. And that one, more so than any draft class we've graded here at PFF, was the blue chip draft class. But like I said, with there's 2 ways. It's who's at the top that you feel great about, that we're going to be damn good players in the NFL, and then the depth. The amount of guys that felt great about being damn good players in the NFL. And so now it was the quarterback draft class too. You had 5 guys.
Right.
5 quarterbacks drafted in the top 15 picks. But after that, outside of those 5, I had 10 guys, 10 non-quarterbacks that I felt great about being high-level NFL players. That was Penei Sewell, Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Micah Parsons, Rashawn Slater, Patrick Surtain, and Christian Darrisaw, and Christian Barmore. That's an insane amount for a draft class. You're lucky to get 3 or 4 in most draft classes, so that doubled it. And obviously a lot of those guys also opted out, and we've seen even guys who aren't on that list ball out since then. But that draft class was stacked, just even taking the quarterback position out of it, and then it was also an all-time quarterback class as well.
Yeah, and it was a class that had a ton of sort of incredibly high-end talent as well. Like
Yes.
we've got the quarterbacks, obviously, we've got the high-end players, but then you have guys like Kyle Pitts who are being talked about as a unicorn. You've got Jamar Chase, who is being talked about as one of the best receiver prospects.
Yeah.
Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn, like these guys are being talked about as incredible. Micah Parsons was being talked up, and everybody undersold how good he was. Like, we're talking about what looks like one of the best players to come into the league in decades in him. Rashawn Slater, Penei Sewell, like these guys are top-level guys right away. So not only was it a great draft class, but it seemed to have a ton of star power as well.
The one knock on that draft class was the depth, because a lot of guys didn't come out.
Right.
So I don't think the depth in day 2 was awful that year, but it was more like day 3 there was no one. There just weren't enough guys coming out that were willing to say, I only played 4 games, let me declare. So you got basically a lot of the Pac-12, a lot of FCS guys just didn't even declare. So it was thin into day 3, but still the top-end talent in that class was insane.
So my second ranked one was the 2018 draft, the Baker Mayfield year. Also a ton of quality players: Denzel Ward, Quentin Nelson, Josh Allen. Obviously, Roquan Smith was sort of seen as really good right away and is excelling now in Baltimore. Just a ton of really good players, even going deep into that first round and beyond.
Yes, definitely a number of blue chip guys in that class. So another great quarterback class where you had blue chippers in Quentin Nelson, blue chipper in Roquan Smith. I thought a blue chipper in Derwin James. Now, it was a little lower down for me just because those guys are a guard, a safety,
right,
an off-ball linebacker. It didn't have the impact players at maybe impact positions, so I had that one ranked 3rd in my top 5.
I'm going to let you away with it this time, Mike, because they're finished playing, but we don't name the player.
Okay, yeah,
podcast.
sorry. That's on me. I just remembered it, actually.
Steve did it during the season. He got hurt almost immediately. So we don't do that. We don't risk it.
Off-season
Now,
IR.
look, their season's done, so he can miss a bit of time in the off-season, but that's all you get. One more, and we're in trouble. What was my next one? My next class was the 2022 version, so most recent one. Even absent of the quarterbacks, I think there's a lot of talent in that draft class. It's just focused somewhere else. It's not on the most important position.
Yeah, so I thought that one, I had that one ranked 4th. The depth of 2022. So what I said about 2021 being a lot of guys coming back meant that 2022 benefited from that in terms of depth. The depth on that class was insane. That was the deepest draft class we've graded, but it did not have, as pretty much everyone told you that whole season, it didn't have the top end talent. It did not have blue chip guys at the top of that draft. Aiden Hutchinson was the number 1 player on PFF's draft board, and even he, if you go back a season into that 2021 draft, would probably not have cracked the top 10 of the PFF draft board that year. He probably would have been 11, 12, somewhere in that range, even though he's a damn good player. It's just that's how good that class was. And so after him, the amount of guys I considered blue chip players, Stingley, Sauce Gardner, Charles Cross, 4 guys. 4 blue chips. Thought the first round was meh, but it was a very, very deep class.
Yeah, and I think some of the guys at the top are sort of showing that maybe they were a little bit undersold, like Sauce Gardner in particular, right? There was, when you were comparing him to Stingley, it was very much a toss-up, but Stingley had all the pedigree, LSU, amazing freshman season, and Sauce, it was like everyone was looking for reasons not to put him in that category when his play sort of suggested he should have been there all along, and certainly year 1 has shown that out.
Yeah, he was 4th overall player in PFF's draft board, Stingley 2. Wish I could have a do-over because Sauce was, he's insane.
Yeah. Next up for me is 2020, and then obviously finally 2019.
Okay, 2020 to me is the second on the PFF. I for some reason, really like this draft class at the time. I think it's borne out to not be quite as deep as I was selling it, but I love the wide receiver class. Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs, obviously. His whatever off field, but on the field was great. Michael Pittman Jr., T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson, like all those guys were top 32 players in the PFF draft board, all born out to be that. And then I think the quarterback class that year was solid. It reminds me of this year's quarterback class where no one's going to rave about how exceptional it was at the time. But all it's done is produce 4 starters that are 4 quality, high-end starters in the NFL. So you get 4 starters in a draft class. That's a damn good draft class at the quarterback position. So I was a big fan of this one at the time, big fan of that tackle class too. Andrew Thomas, Tristan Wirfs have obviously become elite players. Jedrick Wills has been solid at tackle. Mekhi Becton has been injured, but when he was healthy, he was good. Josh Jones, loved him this year as a starter, was fantastic at left tackle for the Arizona Cardinals. So that to me was the second best draft class. And this is me at the time, just saying what I liked about it, because I thought there were a number of blue chippers in that class. I thought Isaiah Simmons was a blue chip player, even though it's taken him a while to come on. But once he's played in the slot there for the Arizona Cardinals, I think that's his best role long term. But I like Kuda as a blue chip, Chase Young as a blue chip, Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb in that regard too, as well as Andrew Thomas and Tristan Wirfs. Like, that was a deep class, and I thought it had some depth. So I was a big fan of that. Maybe it hasn't come as much to fruition, but I still thought it was a good draft class.
And then my bottom ranked one is the 2019 one, the Kyler Murray draft.
That
has a lot of star power, but a lot of not star power as well.
Yeah, to me, it was Nick Bosa, Quinnen Williams. Those were your blue chip players in that draft class. After that, it got thin. And I think that's kind of borne out in retrospect. There's just not been a lot of talent. The wide receiver class got a lot better than it got drafted, I will say.
Yeah.
The second round of that receiver class was one of the best second rounds ever for a wide receiver class, with Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf. Obviously, Terry McLaurin goes in the 3rd in that year's draft. But that kind of reset how we look at wide receiver position, I think. Because from 2015 to 2018, you had 4 straight duds. 4 straight first rounds where if you drafted a wide receiver, you were probably disappointed with what you got. And then by that point, everyone had kind of soured on the position. So you didn't see any go in the top 20, even though we had DK and A.J. Brown as top 20 players in that class. We thought, the NFL just kind of had gone away and be like, oh, the college game, don't draft these guys early. And you see Marquise Brown come off the board late, N'Keal Harry come off the board late in the first round. Those are your only 2 first-rounders. But then the hits immediately of A.J., Deebo, DK, Terry. Basically, the next year, people were like, okay, let's draft them again.
Right.
Let's start drafting these guys.
Man,
and now they can't stop. Now the NFL knows.
And they're all working.
Yeah, exactly.
That N'Keal Harry pick continues to blow my mind consistently year on year. I'll never, as long as I live, understand that. I need like an oral history of that draft pick and how it happened. So where do you think the 2023 class, now this year's group, stacks up next to those?
I'm not going to be very kind to it.
Uh-oh.
I'm just going to say it right now. I have it 5th out of the last 6. Only 2019 I have below it. I have it below 2022, obviously below everyone else. I think there are, I would put 2. So I like the quarterback class. That caveat aside. Again, it reminds me of the 2020 quarterback class where no one's raving about it, but I do think Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, 3 years from now, it could all be 4 starters, 4 quality stars in the NFL. So I like this quarterback class. But then after that, I think there's 2 guys I'm willing to call blue chip players, maybe a 3rd. And that's, 3 guys I'd call blue chip players because obviously one's a running back though. Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, Bijan Robinson. Mm-hmm. That's it. Those are the 3 guys I'm really going to bat for that I think are special at their respective positions that are going to hit. After that, it gets thin fairly quickly. And then once I get to the 40s in this draft class, I'm like struggling to find guys that I want to even put there. Right. So it's not ideal, but the quarterback class at least gives it a bump up a little bit.
All right. So that's not the best ring
not
endorsement.
Not a ring endorsement, but it's a cool quarterback class.